Hello there. There has been quite a stir due to the recent bannings of Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Dockside Extortionist, and it would be an understatement to say that the Magic community has been split into two camps, one saying that this is a miracle, a dream come true, while the others say it was a mistake. Perhaps it is the Feldon player in me, but I think there is a third path in this conversation, and that is both. But first, let's start by some objective analysis of why those cards were banned. Also disclaimer, I do not own any of them as I try to be a budget player as much as possible. The first is Mana Crypt, and assuming it is a turn 1 play, it does the following. It is a free ramp spell that puts you at 3 mana on your turn 1, and potentially some of all your opponent's turn 0. Your turn 2 starts at 4 plus mana assuming you also harrowed into another mana rock, like a Signet, Soul Ring and so on. Downplaying these effects in any form is a bad faith argument, plain and simple. Its supposed drawback as a trigger on every upkeep that has a 50% chance to deal 3 damage to you. Considering the doubled life total in Commander, and the obvious former difficulties of playing classic aggro or burn, this drawback is mostly for your opponents, who have to watch you roll a die every upkeep and sigh when you dodge the damage. Taking this into account, should this have been banned? Yes, a long time ago. Next is Jeweled Lotus, also a turn 0 play that when it comes to casting your commander, puts you at 4 mana on turn 1, with the added benefit that it also mana fixes you, which is something that Mana Crypt for example does not do. It is worth mentioning that it is a one-off effect, and its mana is limited to only casting your commander, a very powerful card and seemingly balanced, unless you take into consideration the last 5-6 years of commanders that have been printed. By my count, 7 commanders have Ward 1, 23 have Ward 2, 5 with Ward 3, 4 with Ward Discard a card, 6 with Ward Sacrifice a permanent, often a creature, and 5 with Ward Pay between 2 and a whopping 9 life. Getting a commander with Ward involving mana 3 turns early in the game makes it nearly unkillable, and essentially having hexproof. Discarding cards or sacrificing permanents can often be too detrimental, and in the case of creatures may be even impossible for control decks, thus having the same effect. Sometimes even paying life can be hard, especially in the singular case of having to pay 9 life. In other words, your already strong commander gets even stronger by being allowed in play 3 turns earlier, possibly giving it 3 turns of unopposed value, or at least until most board wipes are online, but of course by that time you can be ready for them. Before I give the final judgment, let us stop for a moment for some good old whataboutism and compare it to a staple and a blast from the past, Dark Ritual, Urza Saga printing only of course. Dark Ritual is a ritual and a fast mana card. It is also a one-time effect similar to Jeweled Lotus. It also makes 3 mana, just like Jeweled Lotus. So if one is banned, why not ban the other? The answer is simple. Dark Ritual costs actual mana unlike the 0-cost Lotus. Dark Ritual also makes only black mana, which while being able to be used for anything, is also limiting and crucially does not mana fix you. You spend black mana to cast the ritual, and you got black mana in return. Sure, Dark Ritual into Necropotence turn 1 is a very solid play, but it's also pretty limited to mono black commanders, or an ultra gigachat high roll, unlike Jeweled Lotus, which while interacting only with your commander, one must remember that your commander is a card that you always have access to, on turn 1 or 2. All in all, despite being a presumed victim of Ward and other powerful recent commanders, Jeweled Lotus is still too powerful and deserved its ban. Dockside Extortionist on the other hand is a peculiar case. On one side he both costs actual mana to play, unlike the other 2 cards, while both forcing you to play my favorite / weakest color in the game of EDH, and being dependent on your opponents controlling artifacts or enchantments to even be a net positive play. On the other, artifacts and enchantments are widely played, making the card to feel very strong in most situations. However, I do not see Dockside Extortionist as a bannably strong turn 2 play. Let's examine the following, I'd say, classic/ideal scenario. You're in a 4-man game and you're going last. On their turn 2, each opponent plays a Signet, and you play Dockside, getting 3 treasures. If you decide to use them immediately, you have essentially played a stronger Desperate Ritual that has left a 1/2 body behind and has potentially mana fixed you. If you decide to save them for the next turn, on that turn you will have 6 mana available, 3 of which will be one-time use. However, your opponents who have just run with Signets will have just had a 4 mana turn and their mana will remain unless interacted with by removal. And this is the dream fast mana Dockside scenario, which assumes everyone is playing artifacts or enchantments on turn 1 or 2. Also, it is worth noting that compared to Mana Crypt or Jeweled Lotus, if you are going first, Dockside usually cannot be your turn 2, maybe even turn 3 play, lowering his power compared to the other two by a large margin. When it comes to mid/endgame scenario, Dockside truly has the potential to give you massive amounts of mana, since artifacts and enchantments are rather common, and the game has progressed enough for a sufficient number to have accumulated on the battlefield. However, is this a bannable offense? Sure, Dockside is a lot stronger than, say, Mana Geyser or Brass's Bounty, mostly because of his dramatically lowered mana cost and bonus body. But the argument that you can blink it and gain infinite value doesn't really hold water, because if you can do your thing unopposed and demonstrate a loop, well, does it really matter what card you are playing, considering it should be obvious that you have already won and it's time to move on to the next one. All being said, I think Dockside is a strong card, but it did not deserve its ban. Before I move to exploring the arguments against the bans, I would like to mention the case of Soaring. Yes, the card is in every precon, and I probably have like 10 laying around. However, I do consider it near identical to Mana Crypt. Your turn 1 leaves you 2 mana open for another mana rock. Your turn 2 starts with minimum 4 mana, and if going first, your 4 mana play will be against your opponent's turn 1 land go. The supposed downside of flipping coins and boarding yourself in Mana Crypt is even missing here. What I'm trying to say is Soaring had to go. It has to go today, and it will have to go tomorrow if we are truly wishing to have a healthy and balanced EDH format. Now for the loud arguments against the bans. One of the funniest arguments is that Commander is a diverse format, that both it and its players can self-regulate into choosing what to play against who. Here is an example of self-regulation in the form of story time. Back in 2017, when I first got into Commander, I got the Edgar Mark of Precon, started tweaking it a bit with some cards from my old boxes, but I wanted to upgrade it. So after a solid 12-year break, I once again set foot in a card store to do some trading. The guys there also had Commander decks and we decided to do a 3-man game. I got a nice early start, but soon got my helm smashed in by Zulu Helm Smash's commander damage, who in turn got taken out by Edric's combination of an extra turn and an army of elves. Even though I lost, I had great fun, and was actually happy that I was considered a threat to get eliminated first. During this trade, in what I prefer to call evening out the deal, I got a seemingly random card, Sidri Galvanic Genius, mostly because I really liked the art. When I got home I read its abilities more carefully, and it seemed very interesting, and soon I decided to build my first very own commander deck. A few weeks passed and I went back to the store for some more trading and to test my creation in the wild into my second ever commander game. 4 of us gathered and sat around and started talking and shuffling. One guy asked us what are we playing and I said Sidri, and that it was my first time building a deck of my own. He was holding a deck box, but put it back in his backpack and took another one out instead. Do remember that. Then another guy passed by our table and said, "Oh, you guys are playing Commander, scoot up a bit," and joined our game. Since we weren't started, we were okay and then rode to see who goes first. The newcomer won the dice roll, and we drew our cards, some people took a mulligan, then shuffled up again, and then it was finally time for the game to start. It started with Breeding Pool Mana Crypt, oh look who it is, Mox Diamond discarding Bayou, Tap Pool and Mana Crypt for Flash, flashing in Mind Slicer, refusing to pay despite having enough mana, and sacrificing Mind Slicer, forcing all players to discard their hands. Then tapping Mox Diamond for black, and delving his commander Tassigor into play, and then threatening to eliminate everyone who does not concede with commander damage and continuing card advantage from the activated ability. Everyone on the table left. 15 minutes of prep, shuffling, rolling dice, and mulliganing, and everyone left. Not a card being drawn, not a card being played, and everyone left. There were no more EDH games for that day and for quite some time after. Thankfully, this event did not deter me from continuing my EDH journey, but sometimes I wonder if I would have, had this been my first Commander game ever. The moral of the story is that there are people who can self-regulate, like the guy who chose to switch his deck seeing how I was a newbie. But there are also people who cannot self-regulate. That is why there are rules, and that is why there is a ban list. Another argument is that the banned cards were investment, and are now going to lose their monetary value. To this I say, imagine investing in cardboard when there are perfectly legit pyramid schemes all around the internet. A third argument is that banned cards should have been more accessible, reprinted often. So often in fact, that every player should have access to them akin to Sol Ring. I think that is fundamentally against the spirit of Commander. Back in the day this was the format of forgotten cards, cards that do not have a home, that are not competitive enough to pass the standard, extended and then modern test. Instead, artifact-based fast mana starts speed up the game too much for continuous turns at minimal cost to card advantage, compared to for example rituals, or to tempo, compared to normal ramp like Mind Stone on Rampant Growth. Imagine, even if the decks are on CEDH level, you play 2-3 mana creature while your opponent taps his mana crypt for Shivan Dragon. A last argument is that sure, the banned cards were of higher power level, but now players who prefer this type of gameplay will have a very difficult time going forward. I agree with this 100%, and I will even use it as an opportunity to make the smoothest of transitions to finally make my point, that the bans was simultaneously a miracle and a mistake, all because of one simple fact. I think the bans were a late attempt to push against the spillover of CEDH into regular EDH, an attempt that, as seen recently, has divided the community in a very wrong way, when it should have been divided long ago. I will not tire to repeat myself. EDH and CEDH are not the same thing, regardless of the fact that at least for now they use the same pool of cards and the same ban list. It is my solemn conviction that these two need to be separated and have a separate ban list, where Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus remain banned in EDH, along with Sol Ring and maybe even Mana Vault keeping them company, while those same cards remain unbanned and very much playable in the CEDH format. I believe that in making this everyone will be happy, or at least the next thing comes along. As always, thank you for watching. Cheers.